Welcome to the second episode of Talent Talks with Phoenix Recruitment. I'm delighted to be joined today by Michael Walls of Dappr.
How you doing?
Looking forward to getting an insight into his career. So, Michael, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you.
Good.
Yeah.
So, what we want to do is get an insight into various different career pathways,
Okay.
all centering around chartered accountants or accountants. I guess from your point of view, where did it all start?
Well, I'll start at the beginning. Whenever I was at school, I either wanted to be a vet or an accountant, and I grew up on a farm, so I was exposed to animals and veterinary care and stuff like that.
Very good.
But I had the mispleasure of seeing a cesarean being performed. Not great with blood, nearly vomited, actually probably did. So it was actually that set me on the course to becoming an accountant. I was good at maths. There's not really a lot of blood in accountancy,
Not really.
most of the time. So I figured that was a safe choice for me. So,
Okay.
yep.
Did it turn you vegan as well?
No, it didn't.
Very good.
Definitely not.
Okay, so through college, what did you do in college?
So I went to Jordanstown outside Belfast, studied accountancy there. Came up against the first kind of bit of failure in my life. I actually failed the final year on my degree.
Wow. What was the degree in?
It was in accounting.
Okay.
And the reason for that was I was kind of struggling to come to terms with my sexuality and stuff like that at the time. My parents just found out, they weren't too happy about it.
Okay.
So I had to go back and reassess, right, do I really want to become an accountant and how do I go about it? So I went and negotiated with the course director, and he agreed then that I could go back and finish it on a part-time basis over 2 years. It was great because I actually got to work in the finance department of a company called Phoenix Gas.
Great name.
In Belfast, great name,
Brilliant
yep,
name.
great company.
Bar the gas bit.
What?
Bar the gas bit.
Gas. So I got some insights in there, got some experience working in the finance team, and come out the other end with a degree and an offer to work in KPMG then in Belfast.
Brilliant. Okay, and audit?
Yeah, trained in kind of straddling advisory and audit. So there was a new team being created there at the time, business advisory services.
Okay.
I'm not sure what it's called now. It's had a few iterations since I've left. And that was more kind of looking at IT general controls, internal audits, advisory, a few secondments, and supporting the audit team. But the last 12 months was the height of the recession, so I was working in restructuring then to complete my training contract.
Okay, and that's what brought you to EY, I presume. So
Yeah,
the link between KPMG and EY was something I was wondering about. What
Yeah,
brought you
so
to EY?
I moved to Dublin, so
Okay.
I just met someone in my last year when I was working in KPMG who lived in Dublin.
Okay.
There was no opportunities when I was coming to the end of my contract in Belfast. So I looked towards Dublin. There was work in restructuring. I was familiar with restructuring, so decided may as well give that a whirl for the next few years till I find the role that I want. So that's what I did.
So restructuring at that time was very prominent, obviously.
It was, and it was kind of akin to working in industry because a lot of these companies are in insolvency situations. Like if it's in receivership, you're actually trading a business and trying to rescue it. One of the most notable jobs that I worked on was Ashford Castle in County Mayo.
Lovely.
So like it was a bit of a trek going down there and having to stay in a 5-star hotel a couple of nights a week to make sure things were, a couple of nights every few months, not every week. I wish to keep things on track. But it's a nice feeling that your profession is able to save a couple of hundred jobs in the west of Mayo. So that was a nice feeling. But towards the end of my time at EY, all those juicy kind of jobs that I really loved working with commercial aspects kind of dried up, and it was more kind of property receiverships.
Okay.
So didn't really interest me at all. So started looking to get out.
So talk about the skill sets that you pulled from restructuring, right? Bring it to today.
Yep.
What core skills have you taken from that?
Anybody I'd be talking to afterwards now, I didn't realise it at the time, but you're essentially a mini financial controller working in restructuring, depending on the type of work you're doing. So for example, when I was managing the Ashford Castle receivership, you'd be looking at trade, you'd be understanding, right, what are the key metrics and how is the business performing. At the same time, you're using kind of corporate finance skills then to sell a business, so you have to be able to understand, right, what are the what is the buyer looking for, and what are all the kind of key tax aspects that need to be ticked off, looking at the legal side of things as well. And I didn't appreciate that skill set until I was a finance director at unrivalled, when I was sitting down negotiating project financing agreements or looking at other various looking at fundraising with various VCs and stuff like that. So I didn't realise that skill set was learnt while I was working in EY until I was putting it into practice.
Okay. So you had a skill set that you probably didn't realise how important it would be going
forward?
Yeah,
exactly.
Okay.
At the time I just thought I was going through the motions until I found a role in industry that I really wanted, but with hindsight it was a valuable experience that I'm grateful for now.
So with hindsight then, you have someone who's maybe in a training contract or looking at going into a training contract. Is that a route that you'd suggest, even though restructuring is not as prominent on the property side?
Most people train in audit, and I would always say it's a good skill to have, because having professional skepticism and being able to stand back and numbers, and especially when you get to a position of leadership and go, is this correct? How do I know it's correct? Is a skill that's learnt while you're in audit, and then possibly transferring into a restructuring environment or corporate finance environment kind of would help enhance those other skills. But if you move straight into industry after practice, you're going to learn them in industry, albeit not as at a granular level or maybe over a longer period of time, but you're still going to pick up those skills.
Okay. So from there then you moved into industry?
Yep.
Okay. And I guess one thing that you notice when you've looked at your career path, you've been in a few companies that are the leading edge of what they were trying to do or currently do, whether it's Light as a Service, as unrivalled, but then you've also been in Google, for example. So like between the 2 or 3 different environments, what did you really pick up from the difference? Because they're all focused essentially around technology, environmental sustainability.
From my perspective, it just heightened my awareness of how much I enjoyed working with technology. My very nature is I don't like doing a lot of donkey work and quite lazy. So if I can find technology to do it, then I'm going to do that. I'll invest more time and figure out how to automate something or make it more technological advanced than actually doing the donkey work, so that I can spend more time doing analysis and doing value add work.
And that's where it's going, really, isn't it?
That is where it's going, and that's not at the pace that I would like in other businesses. But when you look to the likes of Google and Facebook and a lot of tech companies, they're investing heavily in finance transformation. Like if you look at any jobs board right now, you'll see a finance transformation role there at some point. So it is being looked at the moment.
And we do a huge amount in professional services. Obviously, it's a big focus for us. But that finance transformation space has exploded over the last few years.
Exactly.
And is that primarily focused around the technology piece, do you think? And obviously
it is, yeah. So what a lot of businesses are doing now is looking in-house, looking at their processes to figure out how can we use technology better to make our finance function more agile and fit for purpose.
Okay. And that's something that we'll get to in a while, because I know you've done a lot of content on that too. You look at Google, you look at unrivalled, miles apart in terms of size and scale, obviously. Environment-wise, what were the big takeaways from a Google versus a smaller business, let's say?
Google, I've had a positive working environment working there, or working experience working there. Free food isn't something to be sniffed at. Everybody talks about the Google Stone, which I nearly put on. I got half a stone and I got gastroenteritis, so that got rid of it. So I decided to take up the gym while I was there. So having all these perks are great, but it is hard to lose sense of reality while you're there. I found myself giving out about the free snacks in the bottom drawer at one point, and I had to realise, well, actually they're free. You don't get them everywhere else. You lose the sense of value of what you're actually getting. And it isn't until you're out working in a startup that you appreciate what actually matters to you. So flexible working was one of the first things that we implemented in UrbanVolt. I dress quite casually. You can be professional without wearing a suit.
So obviously you're saying you can dress casually but yet be professional. In terms of the flexibility in the workplace, is that something that you brought in as well to UrbanVolt?
Yeah, it obviously going from a massive multinational company with all these perks and moving to a startup, you can't have free food and gyms and stuff like that. You just don't have the budget. So it's about looking at, well, what do people or what do employees actually really value, and implementing that instead. So having things like flexible working arrangements, unlimited annual leave, dog in the office, and casual dress are really things that people value and allow the flexibility of how they work.
And is that something that you think SMEs or smaller high growth startups need to implement to attract the talent?
I definitely think so, because if the existing companies, if they don't adapt to it, employees are just going to look elsewhere. They're going to look to new and emerging companies that are being set up, like the Googles, the Facebooks, the Slacks of the world, and see what's going on there and go, actually, I want a bit of that. I don't know if you've ever heard of this, the Draper Clause.
No.
So the Draper Clause is essentially, it's come from Mad Men, where each employee gets one thing in their employment contract that's tailored to them. So say, for example, you come in and you said to me, Michael, every year I want to bring my dog to work one day a week, one day of the year I want to be able to bring my dog into work, or it's my child's birthday on a certain day of the year, I need that off, or something random like I really like such and such pizza.
Okay.
Like, get me that once a year and I'll be happy. So it's negotiated by the employee. Obviously there's monetary limits around it, but it allows them to kind of have a little bit of an input into their their contract. Now it's not something that we've implemented, but it's something I was researching lately on how employers are trying to get their employees to be more engaged.
Okay, great. And you mentioned unlimited leave as well.
Yep.
Even from our point of view, it's something that we've really looked into, and I think there's always that initial reaction when you tell people that, oh God, what if someone takes 6 months of the year off? And it's always worst case scenarios. What's your experience having implemented that?
From an employee perspective, it's really good. You don't have to worry about carrying days forward for Christmas to make sure that there's time to take off at the end of the year. You don't have to worry about going to the doctor or dental leave, or somebody, one of your kids being sick and you need to take time off. It allows you to have that flexibility to manage your own time. From an employer perspective, then it's great because you get an employee that's highly engaged, that's more motivated, and it puts a lot more effort into their work. In my experience, we've had to tell people to go on leave because they're taking less leave, which is really a nice position to be in. And also from an accounting perspective, a boring accounting perspective, if people are taking what they need or unlimited annual leave, then you don't have to have a holiday accrual in your accounts. So
okay,
it's pretty good from that perspective.
Yeah, it is. It's an interesting perk, I guess. For me, it always goes back to hiring the right people with the right attitude.
Yep.
Which a lot of places don't really focus in on, unfortunately, right? And that's where the attrition side comes into it.
Mm-hmm.
So I know you wrote recently in Accountancy in Ireland about the importance of cloud accounting, and you used UrbanVolt essentially as your testing field for that. Is that something that you would have brought into Dappr as well? Is that where it all stemmed from?
Absolutely. So when I was at UrbanVolt, when I initially started, the founders just said, look, we need something that can be built for scale and that's agile. So I did a lot of research, and coming straight out of Google, having used all the Google tools there as well, I found them really collaborative. You could work as a team in the one document, kept the office paperless. set up a cloud-based accounting system called Xero. So everything was a lot more. It was a lot easier to run. You could work from, if you had a laptop, you can work from anywhere in the world, which is a pretty nice thing to be able to do. So yeah.
So that remote working piece is important nowadays too.
Yep, absolutely.
And again, it gets that same reaction of, will people work remotely? Is it Netflix and a duvet day they're doing, or is there actual work going on? I mean, is this more of a trust thing from your experience, or what is it that empowers people to do it?
Yeah, absolutely. Like you have to be able to trust your employees. If they're going to be off site and they say they're working on a document, they need to be you have to be able to trust them. Now you can build in checks and balances to that. So using G Suite, for example, I can go into that document and I can see Ed typing away in it.
Yeah.
Or we can have a check-in via video conference, so I can see that you've got out of your pajamas. And even if someone is having to travel for whatever reason and they don't want to use annual leave, but they want to work while they're away, being able to give them that flexibility is pretty cool. Like I have a friend from the south of France who works for Slack. And he was able to go home for a few days and work, and it didn't come out of his annual leave.
Okay.
And that's a really nice thing for people, especially people that are, foreign nationals coming to work in Ireland, to allow them to be able to go home without taking it out of their leave is a really good perk.
Okay. So a bit of advice, I guess, to maybe young leaders or young accountants maybe finishing training contracts. You've seen the startup, high growth phase type environment. You've also seen the Googles. Which one would you suggest go for, or I mean, what experience can they pull out of either of those?
Definitely wouldn't recommend going to a startup straight out of practice.
Okay.
It's going to be full on, intense. There's a lot of work to be done, and unless you have the experience of doing month end, dealing with management accounts and reporting regularly, you're just going to fall flat in your face. Whereas if you go into a large multinational, you might be pigeonholed a little bit, but you're going to understand how the processes work, how businesses interact at scale, and be able to bring that down to a granular level if you were to go into a startup. So I'd always recommend anybody go into a company that's established and is growing and has processes in place, or a large multinational, but I wouldn't recommend going straight out.
Pure startup?
Yep, no, definitely not unless you have 3 to 5 years under your belt.
Okay, interesting. Because it is an area that's growing substantially. I mean, I think even you said that there's no better time to start a new business, which you've done.
Yep.
Why is that, do you think? Why now is the best time to be starting a new business?
Traditionally, about 10, not even 5 years ago, if you were setting up a business, you would have had to invest heavily in kind of having an IT infrastructure and trying to figure all that out in terms of the resources to incorporate a company and set up a bank account and figure out all of the other infrastructure. It was a lot more clunky, a lot more manual and analog. Whereas nowadays, if you want to incorporate a company, there's a service, you go online, they'll incorporate a company for you. You're setting up a bank account, that's relatively easy, and IT infrastructure you don't need. So there's no better time to get on with it.
Okay.
And a lot of businesses are trying to transition into the digital world and embrace cloud-based technology. So if you're setting up a company that already does that, you're already ahead of the curve, so you don't need to make that investment that those existing businesses are doing.
Okay, so now you have your own business, Dappr.
Yep.
Obviously focuses around the digital side of accounting and
correct.
Cloud-based solutions.
Yep.
How did that all come about? I mean, it's an interesting move, although it's still within accounting.
Yep.
What brought the idea about?
So while I was working at Urbanvolt as one of the first 6 employees in the door, you get the opportunity to work really closely with entrepreneurs. So I kind of got a little bit of the entrepreneur bug while I was there. And as I mentioned before, we implemented a cloud accounting system called Xero while I was there. That allowed us to get up-to-date information on the business, be able to respond to due diligence queries from investors far faster than they were used to in the past. Okay. So that speeds up investing. And be able to accurately manage your cash flow. and invoicing as well. And whenever I started thinking about, like, you know, I have family members that have their own businesses, they're small self-employed people.
And is that where you got the entrepreneurial
flair? Well, kind of,
yeah. Or is
your
farming background?
With the farming background, yeah. I don't think my dad is too savvy with a laptop anyway.
Okay.
But I just figured, well, who's doing this, what I'm doing for this company, who's doing it for other small businesses and sole traders? And to be frank, not a lot of people were in that space, and if they were wrapping, you know, existing accounting processes around a more agile cloud accounting technology. So I just figured if you can educate them how to use the tools and apps that are available, you can get them more up-to-date information to help them grow their business.
Is there a specific sector that you focus in on client-wise?
Yeah, so at the moment I'm mainly dealing with startups, and that's purely because they're more likely to adapt to technology, embrace what they want, because they want to be agile, they want to scale up their businesses. So, and most of them are tech businesses themselves. So being able to do that allows us to capture data, learn from that, and enhance our internal processes. Like, for example, if I was to sign up my dad, who's a farmer, and trying to get him to take photos of receipts, it's just not going to happen. So that's purely why we're dealing with startups at the moment. And you know, we've had a lot of people laugh at us for doing that, pretty much saying startups don't have money. Sorry, they do. And you know, we're charging a monthly fee to help them on the journey. You know, if they can't afford to do that, then they're not going to sign up. So, you know, and it's not that big a fee compared to what they would be paying elsewhere. So like, that decision to do this initially is going to help us in the long run.
So it's something that I've even spoken about previously around the impact of technology on finance function, and a lot of people would say that it's going to potentially remove jobs, or it will definitely bring a new set of skills to the table that's required. In your opinion, like, what are those skills and how should people go about getting them?
So that's a very good question. Definitely people need to be more tech savvy. A lot of people shy away from using Excel or any kind of tech in their day-to-day job, like you know, maybe Outlook or email as much as they use. And that's not going to be acceptable anymore. Like, if someone is coming to me looking at a job and they can't use Excel's basic functionality, well then they're not going to be able to use SQL, especially when we move into the realms of big data and stuff like that. So they need to become more. How far away
is that, Michael? I mean, in terms of timescales, are you seeing it now? Is it something that people really need to get learning?
I'd say over the next 2 years it is going to ramp up. Like, data is there, it's just not being captured properly. And we as accountants, we have that skill set, you know, of capturing data, making sure it's in the right buckets, for obviously preparing accounts. So we need to be able to use those skills to go back into the back end of databases and technology to make sure that data is being captured correctly.
Okay, so the top skills, SQL, you think?
SQL, yep. Definitely, it's going to be more about relationships in the future. So, like, people won't need to be physically putting in invoices to system or, you know, processing invoices. All those kind of non-value add skills or processes that are repeatable can be done by a computer. What needs to happen in the future is become more value add activity. So relationship building and being able to advise people how to grow their business or gain insights from the data that's being produced, and it might be non-financial data, is really beneficial. It's going to be beneficial for the future. So to say that we're going to get rid of jobs, I don't think that's an accurate reflection of what's going to happen. I think roles are going to change. So instead of being an AP analyst or an accounts payable processor, instead of, you know, processing invoices, they might be looking at, you know, more of a procurement role. Who are we signing up? What's the kind of analytics behind this vendor and stuff like that? So there's going to be a lot more around analytics in the future as well.
Yeah, it's definitely moving quite quickly as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
So around your career, what has been the biggest challenges that you've had to overcome since you started out, I guess, in accountancy and finance?
Probably the biggest thing was just being an open gay accountant at work.
Okay.
Obviously, for the first part of my career up until I worked at Google, I wasn't, so that kind of held me back a bit. So that's probably the biggest challenge that I had to overcome. Okay. Once I came out the other side, I kind of call it my inner unicorn now, put to good use.
Nice.
And I'm able to deal with and cope with a lot more than what I've previously been able to work with, and that's just releasing that mental bandwidth of not pretending to be something you're not.
So Google's very well known for diversity and inclusion, obviously multiple different cultures, people from different backgrounds, communities, and that type of environment, if you're talking to a business about how to improve the whole D&I side, what would you say needs to change or would help?
Thinking back to my experience working in practice, it was very much a lads culture, chatting about sport and girls at the weekend and stuff like that. I can't engage in those conversations. Not that I'm not interested in any sport, but certainly not whatever ladies I'm meeting at the weekend. So that's kind of drives a wedge of being able to engage and communicate with a lot of other people in the office. So being aware of there are other people there in your business, and just being able to engage with them, chat to them, find out more with them, find out more about them is going to get a lot more out of them. So And
was there any major initiatives that Google or other companies that you've worked for previously did that kind of promoted that or made sure that kind of happened? Because it is an everyday conversation type thing. So was there certain events that made you do certain things to include people?
Certainly, I have a good friend in EY who's one of the partners on diversity. She's a diversity leader in there, and it comes down to education. So being visible and educating the rest of the leadership on what it means to be an openly gay person, that filters down through the organisation, and having an open place to ask questions and stuff like that really helps.
So professional services in general have put a huge focus on that obviously over the last few years, which is slightly different to what you're saying that your experience was. It is definitely changing.
Yeah, no, it is changing. Not saying that I had a completely horrible experience, it just said it could have been a lot better if I was able to be more open about myself.
Okay, great. So you were 2018 Chartered Accountant Star?
Indeed, yep.
What was that program like? The actual global Chartered Star program, was that a new initiative that was someone brought to you, or how did that come about?
No, it's been running for the last few years. It's essentially to select somebody to go to the One Young World conference, which is a youth leadership conference for young leaders under the age of 35. And my friend Sinead Fox had won it the previous year, so I seen she got the experience of going to Colombia and meeting all these crazy and wonderful people. So I decided I wanted to throw my hat in the ring, especially with setting up my own business. I was just conscious of the fact that I was an unknown entity, and you know yourself when you're setting up your own business, if people don't know your background story or you don't have any kind of portfolio, it doesn't really help. So I figured it would be useful for that as well. So the process was I had to write about my experience becoming a chartered accountant, and what that has done for my career to date, what advice I would have for other people, and then what I would take away from the One Young World experience. Then that was shortlisted. There was 5 people interviewed, and I was lucky enough to be successful and selected to go. So it was a busy year. I had to speak at various events for Chartered Accountants Ireland as well, particularly to graduates, and attend obviously the One Young World conference. There was 1,800 delegates from 192 different countries. Some countries I'd never even heard of before. So suddenly there I was chatting to a girl from Turkmenistan. I had lunch one of the days with 2 people from Israel and Palestine, which was quite interesting. We got to hear from various political and business leaders around the world. Like, for example, we had President Mary Robinson was there, Gordon Brown, John Major, the CEOs of BP, Shell, Reckitt Benzer. Like, I could go on, but there was a large range of really positive and uplifting speakers.
What's the focus of the event? What did you pull from it?
The focus is mainly get people thinking about the SDGs, and it was centered around poverty, sexual abuse and education.
Okay.
And to kind of get these young leaders coming away to think about, right, what projects and initiatives can we do in our countries to support the SDGs and what they're doing. So my takeaways were I was going to focus on the environment and climate change. So, having worked in unrivalled, it was something I was quite familiar with. Okay. So I just made sure I'm going to keep Dappr paperless. The next one was around being more open LGBT advocate, and the last one was around balancing the scale of equality in terms of poverty. So working with the charity at the moment, Empower the Family, and they're focusing on getting single mothers under the age of 25 into 3rd level education. Wow. So that's something I'm really passionate about.
That's
as well.
Something in Ireland?
It is, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. A girl called Deborah Somrin, you should look her up, she's really something else.
So Michael, thanks so much for joining us on the show. It's been great, very insightful. I guess if you're an accountant about to jump into industry for the first time, do you have any last pieces of advice?
Don't be afraid to make a mistake. Like, if you're moving for the first time, it's fine if you go and work in insurance and don't like it. You can move into banking, you can move into like the auto industry, you can move into a startup. Like, the skills transferable, so get the experience now is what I'd say.
Brilliant. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.